Yeah, we're live, 7:03. So 3 minutes late. Technically, that's okay. Because yesterday, I was early. It's all good. Tonight, we're going to talk about some cool stuff. I wanted to cover, I had a question for it. I posed a question in the thumbnail. What is the most popular video that I currently have up on the channel? So if you guys know, somebody please chime in and let me know what is the most popular on my channel. So the question is, what is the most popular? Which one has the highest viewage? So which video has been viewed the most? Is it, because I have a live feed every night, and generally we start to talk about some kind of force induction, and we're going to transition into other aspects of stuff, because obviously there are lots of things, and we generally do that on the live feed anyway. I don't want people coming here thinking that we can only talk about turbos. So we're going to change it back over. When I kind of originally started this, it was let's talk tech. So there's lots of technical stuff we can talk about, cylinder head flow and carburetor adjustments and, all kinds of crazy stuff. So we need to talk about that. And it's not just turbos. And the interesting thing is, even though that's one of you got two things. You got one, the LS engine family is kind of even still, that's kind of the big name in performance still. I'm sure that the sales for LS camshafts and LS turbos and all kinds of stuff are still overshadow everything else. I mean, I know that more LS camshafts are sold than small block Chevy camshafts, at least for the manufacturers that I've checked with. So, which is interesting because, small block Chevys have kind of been the darling for a long, long time. And then LS took that stuff over. And even still, even with all the other things that are available, the LS stuff is still number one. So it is kind of the big name. So not surprisingly, it would be very popular. And then, turbo LS is the big thing, which would what everybody, even people that don't have that, they're people that want that. If you have a naturally aspirated LS motor, it's because you want it to be a turbo motor. And almost everybody I talk to that buys a cam or whatever, they're like, yeah, can I put this cam in because I'm going to run an NA until I can afford to buy the turbo and the intercooler and the bigger injectors and the tuning and all the stuff that they need to do go along with their turbo combination. But that usually is the end goal, is the turbo stuff. So turbo LS is the big thing. And I can tell from when I post videos that LS stuff is, and even by extension, when I put promotions of that on Facebook or Instagram, so the LS stuff is definitely more popular than the other things. So the question is, interestingly enough, are turbos some sort of turbo related thing, like a compound boost thing that we did, those kinds of things, are those in the top 5 of my most viewed videos? And if you guys know, go ahead and take a guess and let me know what you think that some of the top 5 ones are. And I'm doing this because I didn't realize this until I went back and looked at them, because I have to go back and rearrange it to figure out which ones have the most views. And it's interesting, the diversity, because I would have thought that, it's got to be, it definitely has to be LS, and it's more than likely something involving turbo LS stuff, maybe the Big Bang stuff, which I would have been, had I done videos on that immediately back when I did that, those I'm sure would have been very, very popular, because it was so big. I know in talking to Freiberger when we first did those, he said, man, that story that you did is just, people are going nuts about it. He said they're either saying that this is the most awesome thing in the world and I can't believe that this is possible, or they're saying this is total BS. There's no way that this is possible. But either way that they're saying, whatever they're saying, there's lots of people saying it. So he was, and you guys probably know that thing was kind of a big deal, back in the day. So had I done that video right away, but still, it's kind of cool to see max effort stuff. So the Big Bang stuff obviously is good. But to answer the question, the interesting thing is that the top 5 videos, so I'll list them off and then we can kind of talk about the interesting thing, like I said, is the diversity. It's interesting that they're not all LS videos. In fact, one of them is, a couple of them are not LS related at all. And I think only one of them is only one of them is really turbo related. So it's kind of cool. There are LS stuff in there. In fact, the #1 video is basically how to get maximum performance out of a 6-liter LS. So kind of specific. And that one is just really 10 combinations that I put together on how to upgrade a 6-liter, anywhere from a stock one all the way up to something, you know, making a bajillion horsepower. So you can see different levels of things. And the interesting thing about that is not that these are the only 10 options that people have. Okay, here are 10 ways that we did it. There are literally millions of ways that you can do it by changing one thing in all of these varieties that you can make that. And that's what I'd like people to get from the videos, is that if we put together a 6-liter and we ran a 210 cam and a 230 cam, and I showed the results of those two things, guess what's going to happen when you have a 220 cam? It's going to be between the 210 and the 230 cam. So you can almost look at the information and then extrapolate what you would do from it. And that's why I try to put up a lot of information. So the #1 video is an LS video, and it's how to maximize power from a 6-liter. And that's, for whatever reason, that resonated best with the people out in YouTube land. The next most popular video is not even an LS video. It is the Boss 302 versus the DZ 302. So the epic 5-liter Trans Am engine fight that I still get people commenting about, and I get really, like, you know, really sided comments on this. People are very aggro on one side or the other, saying that, oh, but, you know, I get guys that try to give me history lessons about, oh, but Chevrolet won this and this, and I'm like, yeah, but Ford won this and this, and it was basically kind of an even split between who won the different Trans Am, the years for the Trans Am when the Trans Am series was really hot. And, you know, I get people that tell me, oh, the Boss 302 is terrible, it made no low-speed torque, and I'm like, if you look at the dyno results, actually that's not true. And the cool thing about it is it gives a realistic, and it is really as realistic as I can give on the engine dyno, but it gives a realistic view of what these engines could do. And the interesting thing is that on the Boss 302 versus the DZ 302, they both achieved, you know, roughly similar power. The Boss 302 is about 20 better or so than the DZ 302. Not surprising, because the cylinder head flow was, you know, 60 or 70 CFM better on the Boss 302 compared to the Fuelie head. So it's not surprising that it made so much power. But Chevrolet went about it differently. They both had 302 inches, and they both had a dual plane intake and the 780 carburetor, and they both had the Chevrolet had a different combination. So the Chevrolet had a combination of not very much head flow and a lot of cam duration. And the Boss 302 had a whole lot of head flow, but a much milder camshaft. So the interesting thing is, if you see, the Boss 302 didn't suffer down low because it had a fairly mild cam. And if we take a look at LS3 stuff that has a ton of head flow and a really big port, it doesn't really suffer down low. Admittedly, it has a bit more displacement, those other motors did, than the DZ 302 and the Boss 302. But that's the second most popular version. And again, people still argue about that today, so I still get comments, which is interesting. The next one actually is an LS turbo video, which is good, because, you know, we talk about, you know, let's talk turbos, we have to talk about a turbo. And this one was which one is better? Which one would you rather have, 5-liter or a 6-liter, if you're doing a junkyard turbo? And the reality is that, you know, as an absolute thing, the 6-liter, either stock or modified, is going to make more power than a 5.3 stock or modified. And then when you add boost to that, it's still going to be making more at any given boost level. But what I tried to talk about in the video is the fact that, you know, you need to not look at it that way. Okay, one's better than the other. Yeah, it is. But if you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower, you can easily do that with a 5.3, which you can find a dozen or more of those in the wrecking yard at any given day. I myself have not been lucky enough to find a 6-liter in the wrecking yard, but they are there. And I know guys like the the guy from the Driveway Engineer. Now I can't think of his name, but I follow his stuff and on Facebook and everything. But he finds them all the time. So I always send him messages about, can pick me up like 5 or 6 of those, because I would really like to get those. But you need to look at it differently. Not just that the 6-liter is better than the 5.3, because we made more power with the 6.0 in terms of big bang motors than we did with the 4.8 or the 5.3. You're starting with more, and at any boost level, you're ending with more. But if all you want to make is 700 horsepower, you don't need to wait and get a 6-liter to do that. You can do that with a 4.8. You can do that with a 5.3. Even 1,000, even more than that, you can get all of the readily available 5.3s and make that kind of power with them. The 6.0 will spool them up better. And the other thing to think about is on a 5.3 versus a 6.0, you need to choose your turbo differently for those two. Even if you wanted to make the same power, if you have the 1,000 horsepower level, and that's the one that I always use in the example, the hot side of that turbo on a 6-liter should be a little bit bigger than it should be for a 5.3. Like on the 475s that we use, and I use a single one of those on the 5.3, it's a T4 version with a tighter AR, because we run it all the time as a single on smaller motors, but also because we ran it as twins on the 6-liter stuff. And so as twins, you want them to be smaller so they can be kind of responsive. For what we were doing for the Big Bang, that wasn't really an issue. But that's the third most popular one, is which one of those is better. And you guys, again, it's presented so that people can argue different ways, whatever they want to do. The next one is another LS one. Not surprisingly, again, the LS family is kind of the family for engine stuff. But it's how to choose a camshaft for a junkyard 6-liter. So I think that the reason that this one is popular is because it has an awful lot to do with the one that's the most popular, and that's the maximum performance kind of 6-liter stuff. People really like to know how to make 6-liter stuff make more power. And the video that I need to do next is how to do a low RPM torque truck one. Everyone wants low RPM trucks stuff. They want to know what camshaft is going to make a bunch of low RPM torque for a truck. Well, I have news for you. At 2,000 RPM, you're not going to get more torque from a camshaft. It's just not going to do that. In fact, like at part throttle, which you're doing most of the time in a truck, because you're not usually standing on it at 2,000 RPM. If you're trying to, accelerate, even accelerate fairly hard, and you're not at full throttle, having the bigger camshaft might not be the way to go. There are other things that you would do to make more torque from the 6-liter and enhance that drivability portion of it, so that it felt better and it would tow better and all that. There are other things that you do, and camshaft actually is not one of those. Camshaft works really good at slightly higher engine speeds where you can pick up power, but you want to do different things to pick up more torque. So I need to do that video, and I think that probably would maybe end up being one of the ones that would be in the top 5 also. So the next one, and this one was actually number 1 for a really long time, because it kind of surprised me, and I think maybe because it had a really cool name, and I did this back when the Avengers things was really big, and I named it Stormbreaker. And the reason that I named it that, it's about putting a supercharger on a TorqueStorm supercharger on a V6, a 4.3 liter V6. And it was a Torque Storm. That's the that's the Stormbreaker. And because Stormbreaker was huge, and if you did a search on, if Stormbreaker was a big, like, widely searched thing on the search engines, so I think it directed people. They're like, there's no Thor here, or what? But there's a cool video of boosting a 4.3 liter V6, which there's not a lot of that stuff out there. So people kind of gravitated to that, and I showed what happened and it was a wrecking yard motor, and then we did a camshaft in it and did a blow through deal with the blower and everything, and it made good power. And that motor's still out running around in my buddy Harold's boat. Not with the blower and not with a big camshaft. Just, it's much milder than that, because it's just a boat and he's driving around in it and taking his kids out, which is awesome. That's the top 5. So I wanted to list one more, because there was another one that was very close, and it's in the top 6. And the reason I mentioned it is because I actually discussed this with somebody today. I met a guy today. We took my dogs over today and took them for a walk up in the hills and stuff, and took them over to a dog park. And one of the guys that was sitting there with his wife, as a matter of fact, his wife is the one that mentioned it, said, "Are you Richard Holder?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, my husband, watches your stuff, which is awesome. So it was great to meet them today." But I was talking to him about the next video, which is the cheap eBay blower. So it was the blower, the Cadillac blower, and that the guys from Mac Daddy Parts did the adapters for, so that you could take that Cadillac blower, that there were a few, I don't know, several hundred of those available, and nobody was really doing anything with them because it's a difficult adapter pattern to make, to adapt from that Cadillac deal to an LS, but the combination worked well. And and this is what I was talking to him about, is that the other downside to that, after I did that video, because that video had the initial growth that was much more rapid than any of the other videos that I've done. So it just took off. But the other thing, the side benefit or detriment, is that the price of the blowers that were available on eBay just shot up rapidly, which is unfortunate. I hate doing stuff like that. I obviously didn't do that by design. I didn't want that to happen. But people were sending me, my phone was blowing up because they're sending me screenshots of the before and after of people raising the prices on these blowers. Because now all of a sudden this was really popular and hundreds of thousands of people were watching this video. And so people that had these blowers are like, oh, now these things are desirable because somebody has adapter plates for them, even though they're fairly expensive. People still want these blowers now. And so now the price, jumped up by 2 or 3 times what they were. And so I'm sorry for doing that to everybody. But those are my top videos. And it goes to show you that of the top 6, essentially, 3 of them are, 2 of them are not LS. The other ones are LS. Like I said, the number one in terms of, and maybe that has a function. Maybe that's a function also of me, because of what I've been doing a lot of. But I test more than just LS stuff. But the market out there seems to be, at least for these videos, that they really like the LS stuff. But 2 of them in the top 6 anyway, the Boss 302 and DZ 302, and then the Stormbreaker little V6 one, they're doing well. So it shows you that and obviously a lot of the videos that are out now that could be doing well haven't been going as long as these others. So we'll see other kinds of tracking and other kinds of changes in whatever the top 10 is. Although the 6-liter video, the one that's number 1, still is climbing and still tracks very well. So it's doing well. But it's cool that we have these other things. And that's kind of what got me started down the other guy's path, is because I like those things, and I would do them even if the videos didn't perform very well and other people didn't want to watch them. Like I still do lots of, and I'm about to load up a Honda video, but the Honda videos don't do as well. The modular Ford stuff doesn't do as well. The Hemi stuff, oddly enough, doesn't do as well unless I'm doing a comparison to something else, especially if I do a comparison to an LS, then it does much better. But I'm going to do them anyway because I like them. So I like doing Cadillac videos. I like doing the 4200 stuff. I like doing the, anything weird. I really want to put the Sprint turbo motor on the engine dyno if I could figure out a way to make that work. Obviously the 2.2 liter stuff, I don't think that's going to track anywhere near as popular as these are, because it's a motor from back in the 80s. But I'm still going to do it because I like it. I think it's cool. I like doing that kind of testing, and I'm not doing all of this stuff just so that I can get lots of views and this and make money off it, because that's not what this channel is about. It's because I really like dyno testing, and I like dyno testing on a 2.2 liter Chrysler motor every bit as much as I like doing it on an LS. As a matter of fact, sometimes more so, because it hasn't been done. The industry needs that. That's why I got that RB25, is because I did a fairly exhaustive search and nothing came up on, there's lots of like, oh, I built this RB motor and it made a bajillion horsepower. And that's great. And I like watching those, and the big power stuff that somebody spent a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort on. That's all fantastic. But there's nothing there like I would want to see. The stuff that I would want to see is, okay, the intake manifolds that are available are worth this much. Like I did the intake test shootout for the LS stuff, or for small buck Chevys or big buck Chevys or whatever. You know, ported heads are worth this much, and the different camshafts are worth this much. And here's what happened when we change boost, and here's what E85 is worth, and here's what an intercooler upgrade is worth, and here's what a bigger throttle bite. You know, all of the stuff individually, I want to see what those are worth, because going from a stock one to all of it, most people don't do that. There's lots more people in the middle there that can just do one thing. A guy may go to a wrecking yard and get a bigger throttle body that will bolt onto the draw through 2.2 liter turbo deal. What's that worth? Well, let's find out. Let's show him, because he's going to do that. He may not do other stuff, but he'll know what that's worth. And then what is each pound of boost worth? And then what happens when we put an intercooler on and an E85? And those are all things that a guy will do and wants information on that. And even if there's not 100,000 or 1 million guys that are doing that, if there's only one guy and this helped him, you know, that's all nothing but good. So we can get to our question and answer period now. Hopefully you guys get answered, and you know, let me know what you thought was the most popular video. But let's see what kind of questions you guys got. $50 for an LS2, that's pretty cheap. Dirt cheap. Will Boss 210s be too much for a 4.9 liter race only with a power goal of less than 1,000 horsepower? Yeah, I mean, if you have them, you could use them, but that's way more injector than you need. You only need 4 of those actually to make the kind of power that you're talking about. The 4200 video is not anywhere near the top, but it, you know, like I said, I didn't do them all just to get views. I am excited about doing more 4200 stuff. Yes, and a rotary would be very cool. Yeah, Mike, wiring the wastegate shut's not a good idea. The maximum power that the turbo will make is most of the motors can withstand that out at the top of the RPM range, but it's at 3,000 or something where it can do all of the boost. And so the boost is very, very high there, and that's usually where they blow up. The Danger Rangers. I have seen Turboman 351. I have seen the V10 Triton motors in the wrecking yards before. I have found those. I've only seen one Dodge version, the V10, in a truck. And it wasn't complete, the one that I saw. People had already started taking parts off of it. But I have found a few Triton V10s. I don't know if they were runners or not, but it would be cool to do that just as a gee whiz thing, because it's different. 200 shot on a 4.7. 200 would be a lot, because that motor probably doesn't make a whole lot of power. I think I would start off at less than that and then work my way up. And for a 200 shot on that, you might want to, on a 4.7, you might want to think about rain gap in that, or at least good gas. Yeah, the 3-valve V10 would be desirable for me because it starts out with more power. Bad Tree Productions, a buddy of yours wants you to film an 800 to 1,000 horsepower. That's a big spread. 2.4 liter turbo neon. It doesn't say turbo, but it has to be a turbo neon motor. So that's possible with a 2.4 liter with a really good ported head and cams and the right intake, and then lots and lots of boost. Yeah, the V10s were in a lot of full-size stuff. The Morty, the engines are all the same price in the wrecking yards for us. I'm working on the backdrop stuff for the green screen. I don't have the right, right now I don't have the right lighting for it. So Matthew, you want to build a 3-valve version, 543 valve version of the Lightning. We ran boost on 4.6 3-valve stuff. We ran blowers and turbos on them. Does the dyno have an RPM efficiency limit? What is, I don't know what you mean by efficiency limit. Will header up hurt my steam pipe turbo header? You mean, will it reduce the life expectancy of your turbo header? Yeah, I wish the 440 would have done better. I mean, that was a motor that I didn't know anything about, and I think that there's more power to be had on the 440. I ran fairly low boost on that, and I think that was Freiberger's motor. They might have ended up hurting that after I ran that. Surfside, 2 44 millimeter wastegates and a 50 millimeter blow off should be enough for that. How do you tune fuel and spark on a budget? Well, if you have a factory ECU, then you have to do it with some kind of factory programmer like a HP tuners or those kinds of things. Assuming that a cam card that does not list lash to be hydraulic. That's a good assumption, although the cam description itself should tell you. Elite, I don't know about an ECU for that was from an LS that plugs right into the harness for an LT. And I think, oh, to my Gen 2 LT1? I'm not aware of that. Are you going to supercharge the 440 horse 327? I don't have that motor anymore, so I'm not going to do that. But the torque storm, if I did put a torque storm on it, it won't go to 800 because that blower won't make that much power. You'd have to put a bigger blower on it, but it's certainly possible to make 800 out of that motor if I had like a pro charger on it, or maybe a 671, like that 671 from the guys at the blower shop. That would probably that could get to 800. Justin, an LSA supercharger would be good for towing and stuff. Aaron, I have a video up of a inline 6-cylinder Ford. I thought that has a crossflow head on it. It's an aluminum one, so take a look at that. Sean, I wouldn't know how to make maximum power on a 4-valve with a 91 octane. I wouldn't ever try to do that. I haven't done anything with a newer Ford 6.2. Andy, I've actually done that test already. I put Gen 6 heads on a Gen 5, so I'd have to go look and see what the change was. Yeah, Tim, the 3-valve version of the V10 was rated quite a bit higher than the 2-valve version was, and I can see why after seeing the cylinder heads. No, Google, the dyno will continue to register RPM consistently, and we've run over 10,000. People complain about header wrap rusting. I don't know about the rusting. What it does is not let the thing, it doesn't let the thing heat cycle properly. I don't know why it would retain moisture. But what is it? Is it going to stop it from lasting, 15 years instead of 20 years or something? The next time I'm down at West Tech, we should be running the 360 Magnum again. Special stage 2. It's a stage 1, actually. Would you do a boosted pump gas meth injection with a Victor intake? That's how much boost you could run with compression and distribution of meth like it did on the LS. So you want to see what if distribution for water methanol is better in a single plane manifold? I would suspect that it is, but water methanol is not going to work as well as an intercooler does. Get busy. Okay, get busy. That's clever. What size turbo is best for a 402? Tell me what kind of power that you want to make. If you want to make 1,000 horsepower on a 402, which is pretty easy because that 402 is probably going to make over 500 anyway, and it might make closer to 600 depending on how you configure it. An S480, I think, is what I would go with on a 402, and that would be a good 1,000 horsepower turbo. You could do 2 GT45s, which would be fairly cheap if you want to go into the 1,500 range. I don't know where you want to go. I don't really have a favorite LS engine. It's whatever the next one I get that's running good. Robzilla, if I put a hole in a block, I wouldn't ever fix it. I've never fixed one, unless it was one. If it was a V12 Ferrari or something, we had to fix it because it was cost prohibitive not to do that. But if we put a hole in an LS block or small block Chevy, we just go get another one from the wrecking yard. Yeah, ProCharger has a lot of good blowers and their size for different power outputs. So just get the one that you don't need a 2,000 horsepower ProCharger if you're only wanting to make 700 horsepower or something. Get one that's sized right. A D1SC is a good street blower. Yeah, Brett, I haven't seen the latest version of Engine Masters because is it on some sort of pay-per-view thing or something? Because I have Motor Trend TV, but I haven't been able to find it after we've searched for it. It's got an Amber Alert. Andy, I think people would like to see the difference in cast iron head, peanut ports versus 781 versus Vortex, and a mile 454. What is this? What is a 781? Is that a rec port head? The next thing I'm going to do on the Magnum, on the 360 Magnum, is we're going to run a different camshaft in it. We're going to run the UT Awesome intake manifold and throttle body on it, which we know helps because we've already run that test for the guys at Engine Masters. He wanted to run it with a different camshaft because the camshaft that we had in it was I think it had a wider LSA than he wanted, and he wanted it to be tighter so that it makes power down low. And so we'll do that. And then I might try a 4-barrel intake. And then I think we should probably try boost, right? Not a lot, but some. Elite, I have seen people upgrade, go away from the OptiSpark and put LS coil packs on those and use that. But I didn't know what ECU they used to do that. If you can get 600 NA, you can double it. You want to double it, so then you just add 14 and 14.7 pounds of boost. So you double atmospheric pressure, and you can get pretty close to doubling it. But which motor do you want to make 600 NA out of? That's a lot of NA power. Is there a 3.5 liter Gen 6? I think that there is. The 3.5 Gen 3.5 is a combination of, usually it's a Gen 3 block and then Gen 4 rods, because they introduced the Gen 4 rods, I think, before they changed over completely to the different blocks. But it wouldn't surprise me that there are. I haven't looked directly to find that out, but I know that there are of other LS engines. The two GT45s is a good way to make lots of power. I think we did over 1,000 horsepower with the 454. Andy, the problem with doing the reason that you want to do the head swap, going from taking the Gen 5 peanut port head off and putting the Gen 6 head on, the biggest gain you're going to get is not from the airflow change. The Gen 6 head does flow more than the peanut port head. Not a ton more, but some. But it has a chamber that might be as much as between 18 and 20 cc's less. So you're going to get a big change in static compression, which is where you're going to get most of the gain from. And putting a peanut port head on a Gen 6 is not really going to show you what the camshaft does, because it's going to show you what that camshaft does and a big change in static compression as well. So you're changing two things there that are going to be problematic. How can I make 600 horsepower with a 392 IHC V8? Probably with boost. An F3 blower. Yeah, that's a lot of blower. Aaron, what is it you're trying to figure out between static compression and dynamic compression? Why are you concerned with that? Oh, the Motor Trend app. Okay, I don't have that, I don't think. Motor Trend on demand. I don't know if we've converted Dulcich all the way to nitrous, but it does work pretty well, though. Magnum, Magnum, Magnum. It's like a limbo dance, huh? Joy Cold Snack, thank you very much. I was wondering why dyno charts rarely show below 2,500-ish. The dyno can hold it. Like we've run, if you look at some of the, look at the LS camshaft, the stock LS camshaft test. We started those tests at 2,000. So we'll do that. The problem is that the dyno won't allow you to run from 2,000 to 8,000 RPM. At least the Superflow won't allow you to do that. The DTS, which I don't like their software as well, might allow you to do that. But typically they don't run engines for that RPM span. You can't do that. So you have to, if you want to start at 2,000, normally about a 4,000 RPM spread is you can do that fairly effectively and have good numbers on both ends. So if you wanted to run from 2,000 to 6,000, that'd be okay. But if you need to go to 7,000, then you have to make another run from 3,000 to 7,000 or 3,500 to 7,000 or whatever. That's typically why. And also 2,000 RPM at wide open throttle is like 1% of the market, because nobody is at wide open throttle at 2,000 RPM. I know I've said this over and over again. Oh, 781 is the oval port head. So is it like an 049 then? Okay, it is like an 049, Andy. Before I even read that, yes, Harbour South, Australia. Nice. Victor Harbour South. Nice. Have you ever compared OptiSpark versus coil ignition conversion on the 90s LT1 and then added a turbo? No, we have run, we've run the OptiSpark, and then I've put then we did put a distributor on it, so maybe I have, but I'd have to go back and look and see if we did. I don't know if we ran it both ways, because when we changed the intake manifold, we put on, excuse me, I think I put on the, I'm almost thinking that we put on the LS version or the regular small block Chevy version of the Super Ram and then use a distributor, if I remember right. I've heard big blocks typically run hot. I don't think you can universally say that. I don't have a high ram for the Hemi. I could get one. I'm sure that they would send it, Tom, if I wanted one. 600 horsepower Ford 300. Yeah, so then you'd want a turbo on that. And the GT45 would work fine. Daniel, if you want to drive it, I wouldn't worry at all about doing the LS head thing. And I wouldn't even worry about going crazy on porting the stock head. Port the stock head, do it at home yourself, and then put a camshaft in it, and you can make 600 horsepower with the turbo. The turbo will do that. It just, if you have to add another 2 pounds of boost, rather than going through all that with having to spend a ton of money to make a big head porting, or to do some sort of head swap deal like an LS or the other ones are the Cleveland heads, I think, that guys put on those. Don't worry about that you don't need that with a turbo. That's the great thing, is you just, hey, here's 2 more pounds of boost, and I just put LS heads on it, and that's what happens. What if you compared the Gen 6 heads with peanut part heads to the other Gen 5 tests you did? I wouldn't ever compare it to other tests that I've done, because I don't like doing that. I would only do a direct back-to-back test on the same motor or whatever, because that's the only way to tell. Because I don't have a baseline. I'd always go back, even if we run something over 2 days. We always put the motor back on, leave it in whatever the last configuration was, put it back on the dyno, rerun it and re-verify the baseline to make sure that it's still the same. It usually is, but we want to verify that. I wouldn't go back 10 years or whatever and put another motor on and compare it to something that I ran before, because What if there's a 5 or 10 horsepower difference between that or between the motors themselves starting out? There's a lot of differences, and I don't really like to do that. What type of octane do I need to run a particular static or dynamic compression ratio? That's a great question. The problem is that everybody wants an answer to that. They want to say, okay, on 91, you can run this dynamic compression, and those don't go together. That's not actually a real thing, because there's so many other things that determine what the detonation threshold is, which is what you're talking about, that have nothing to do with dynamic compression. Your chamber design, your quench, the temperature of the water, the temperature of the air, there's the back pressure. There's a lot of things that determine what the detonation sensitivity of the motor is that have nothing to do with dynamic compression. Oh, get busy, a 6.2 with an L8T rotating assembly. If anybody saw the L8T that the Holly and I think Skog and Dickey guys did, they made 2,000 horsepower with, I think, a stock block and the stock crank for an L8T. And then they did a forged rotating assembly with it and 2 turbos and stuff. So that's big power. We've run the dyno. I think that the guys at West Tech have run even lower than 2,000 RPM. Again, I don't know why you want to, because you're never at 1,500 RPM. You're not at wide open throttle. I haven't seen any school bus V10s in the wrecking yards, and maybe I need to look at different wrecking yards to try to find those. Snafu, I don't think that that's accurate. The heat retention, the old iron head, aluminum head thing, that the aluminum head allows more heat to escape, and so it makes less power. Freiberger has tried to test that, and Brule, they've tried to test that many times. The problem is you can never find 2 heads, an aluminum head and an iron head, that are exactly the same. That every aspect of the head is the same. One of them is just an aluminum copy of an iron one, and they never are. So they haven't been able to do that test to find out if that's actually true. You know, there's all of this internet folklore about that, but I don't think that that's true. I would rather use an aluminum head. I don't know which pistons they used in that L8T. It didn't have all that information. It was just a photo, like an Instagram post or whatever of it. There may have been a link there, but I didn't go to it. I always get people asking if a head swap from a peanut port to a 781 049 is worth it. With a stock cam, I wouldn't bother doing that, because the peanut port head, Andy, is not holding the power of that motor back, not with a stock camshaft. Ported 049 heads work really well. I have video up where the Bryce from Dr. J's did a set, and they worked good. Admiral's here. What happens if I don't tune my ECU after dropping 1,000 cc injectors? That should really work out well for you. Admiral, the 2.6 liter TVS can, the 2650, I'm sure that's what you're talking about, is a serious player. It can make a lot of power. Casey, the throttle body injection on the 5.7 small block is going to really limit power. It's going to limit the amount of airflow that you can get in and the amount of fuel flow that you can get in. The intake design is not ideal. There are aftermarket throttle body injection intake manifolds, but again, the opening is still too small and the amount of fuel that you can get to it is just too little. If you put a carburetor on that, you'll pick up an easy 30 or 40 horsepower just by putting a carburetor and a dual plane on it. Sean, I don't think that you dig into the longevity by revving the crankshaft to 7,000 RPM. As long as the tune and everything is right and you have the right oiling. And if you did, let's say that it running to 7,000 RPM instead of 6,000 RPM reduced, every combination has cycle life. So reduce the cycle life by, let's pick a number. Let's say it's 20%. Let's say you reduce cycle life by 20%. That after you reached its cycle life, you do it 20% earlier, and then the crankshaft would just break. That's probably not reality, but let's say that that's the case. How many millions of cycle lives does that crankshaft have? So let's say that it would last 30 years, and now it's going to last 24 years because we've. Did I do my math right? So it's 20% less. So, you know, it might last longer than you're ever going to have the motor anyway. So that's not really an issue. I don't remember what size turbos there were. I'm sure that they were S475 size deals. I think they may have told me what the turbos are. They were probably Precisions, if I remember right. What is an LAT? I don't know what that is. What's the most power 3800 V6 can make on just a supercharger? I'm told there are guys making 500 at the tires with that. It's a Gen 5 blower that's been cut apart and ported, and they're spinning it with a 2.5-inch blower pulley, or maybe even smaller than that. It's intercooled. They have ported heads. They have different pistons and rods and big camshafts and all the stuff that you need to do to make lots of power. I've never actually seen that happen, but that's what I'm told happens. But that's the extreme edge. Most guys are making 300 to 350 at the tire with those things. You build a ton of combos on the dyno. Do you own a hot rod? I'm the original owner of my 1988 5-liter LX Mustang. I have a 1971 240Z. I have a 1972 Nova Project that's sitting, and also a 1985 Dodge Omni GLH. And I just sold an F355 Spider. What do you think about the VS Racing turbos from Summit? Yes, they work really well. I like Viren, and the 7875 Gen 2 that I have is a 1,000 horsepower turbo, and it works good. Midwest, stock injectors won't be anywhere near enough fuel flow for a turbocharged. I'm assuming that this is an LS. I haven't done any boosted 396 Chevys. I don't think I've ever even run a 396 on the dyno, but I'm planning on it. I'm planning on running an L78, a reproduction of the original 375 horse 396 or 425 horse 396 if it was done in 1965 by the marketing department. Bryce is still around, but Dr. J's is no longer around for porting. Individual throttle bodies are cool, and people like that kind of stack injection. The issue with the TBI is that the stock ECUs are very, very slow and can't run anything bigger than an RV cam. Yeah, they don't like having a big change in cam profile and therefore like map reading. But even if you got that right and replaced the ECU, which we've done with with an aftermarket ECU, change my lighting here. The throttle body itself, even if you put the 454 throttle body on there or the big one, it still doesn't flow enough. The intake manifold doesn't flow enough, and the fuel doesn't flow. There isn't enough fuel to make really any power. If you take that stuff off and put a carburetor on there, all of a sudden there's enough, and it makes decent power. Richard, can you do a triple water to air intercooled? One intercooler you want to do an intercooler before the turbo? That's not a good idea, because that usually is a restriction. Drawing through the intercooler is not a good idea. Pressurizing the intercooler, the flow rate, it's just like with a throttle body. If you have the throttle body before the turbo, you're going to have a flow restriction in the throttle body. Because let's say you have 1,000 horsepower, that throttle body, like if you had a 105 millimeter throttle body, is not going to want to flow 1,000 horsepower worth of air. If you have it on the other side, on the pressurized side, it's going to easily flow 1,000 horsepower worth of air. As a matter of fact, it'll probably flow 2,000 horsepower worth of air. Same thing with the intercooler. So you don't want an intercooler in front, but multiple intercoolers after that, I am going to test. I'm going to do 2, so I was going to call it the twinner cooled, which, patent pending. Because I want to see how low we can get it. And then we'll try other things with the intercoolers, different types of transfer medium. 5-liter production iron block horsepower limit. A 5-liter late model thin wall casting hydraulic roller block. I'd like to see somebody that was, I'm told that guys are making lots of power out of those, but I would really like to see that. I suspect that guys that are doing that are using early blocks, which should be stronger. A 240Z L6 on the dyno. The 240Z needs the RB motor in it. Yeah, Admiral, that would be a good one to find, the LPG version of the V10. All right, Randy, we'll see you. Hello. The twin turbo DeLorean was definitely cool. Those things have needed a engine swap from day one. The Fox body's a notch. Yes, it's like a highway patrol car, basically. Real Mustangs have trunks, actually. And I had a 65K coupe, a GT, 4-speed car, 411, yada yada, pony interior. And I thought it was really cool. And I used to say the same thing because I had a notch 5-liter, and I thought, oh God, cool, Mustangs have trunks. But I would have traded that 65 in a heartbeat for a fastback one, because then I could have made a Shelby clone, which is I think ultimately cooler. But on the 5-liters, I like the notch better than I like the GT body style. Eli, you're putting a turbo kit on your 2-valve Mustang. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about porting the heads unless you're going to do a camshaft. But yeah, if you're putting rods and pistons in it, that's good. Head studs, definitely MLS head gaskets on it. Big injectors. A Coyote would look cool in a DeLorean as well. $14.7 at wide open throttle. That's not good. Blow through Holly 650 or triple deuces. Well, the triple deuce would be better. I mean, it would be cooler, but is it going to be more problematic? Mitch, there's no number of boosts that you can run without ring gap. You just have to try it and see if it works, because you don't know what the ring gap is if you don't take the motor apart. I've only run the 4-valve cams. I've only run the smaller 262 cams. Draw through carburetors, draw through turbo stuff is cool, but it's hard to get turbos that have the right seals for that. Draw through, if you have a carburetor in front of the turbo, the draw through stuff is difficult because trying to get it to be intercooled is problematic because the fuel comes out of suspension, and if it backfires, it's a big problem. I'd like to see him build 2V, 4V bottom ends and see what happens with cams versus ported heads versus fully aspirated. I don't know what that question is. I have lots of videos up on modifying 2 valves and 4 valves. We've run ported heads on them. We've run different intakes on them. We run different camshafts on them. So the answer to your question is probably up there. All right, punk's out. Peace out. Punk out. Okay, guys, 1 more minute and I've got to get going. I've seen information on dual fuel engines. The LS had dual fuel stuff, right? Those are the injectors that everybody wants. I would kind of like to do a 2-valve Big Bang. It'd be interesting to see. I don't have any more ported heads or anything for those anymore. I don't know why you'd want to run 14.7 at wide open throttle. It doesn't seem safe, and it doesn't seem like it would make as much power. Yeah, I mean, I've already run boost on a stock one, but the problem is it doesn't make any. It's not going to make any power because the motor only makes, sub 300 horsepower NA, and so it's then we get 600 at 14.5 pounds or whatever, and then we don't get 1,000 until into the 30 pounds of boost, and that's not any good. I'd rather put ported heads and cams in it, and I might use the PI intake, or I might put something on there like I think Edelbrock has a Victor or a Victor Junior or something for that, right? For the 2-valve, if I remember. They didn't have that when I was testing them, but I think that they do now. If they did, Reichardt Racing, some sort of short runner deal, so that we could then boost it and make power at a higher engine speed, like 6,000 plus RPM. And then we could make lots and lots of power, because I don't want the horsepower and torque to be the same. And on the modified 2-valve stuff, it's like that. I think we were at about 400 or so horsepower and 390 foot-pounds. So they're fairly comparable. So I'd rather have it make peak power at, and like I did the adjustable manifold, and that pushed power out at a much higher engine speed. I think the Sullivan stuff was 4-valve stuff. I don't think he had a 2-valve deal. Okay, there is a Victor Junior. Okay, for the 2-valve, I'm assuming. Okay, they do have Victor Juniors for 2 valves, 4 valves, and okay, so and 5 pores. Okay, cool. So that would help push the power out higher, and hopefully, even though it's going to make a lot less power than the PI through most of the curve, I'm certain, but it would still, maybe if it makes a little more on the top, and then that would give us the area where we want to run the big boosted number. So it would be kind of cool. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up. I got some Honda stuff going up next. If you haven't taken a look at the modular stuff, take a look at that. It's up, and I will see you all tomorrow.